Welcome to The Explainer.
So, are we born as blank slates, shaped entirely by our experiences? It's a huge question, right? One we've been asking ourselves forever. Today, we're going to dive into Steven Pinker's big, influential book, The Blank Slate, which argues that this whole idea, well, it isn't just wrong. He says it's become a kind of dogma, one that's really warped how we talk about things in public for decades.
So, the book kicks things off by laying out what it calls the official theory. This is basically the dominant view of human nature that, he argues, has really run the show in modern intellectual life. And this theory, it rests on three core ideas, three doctrines that you've probably come across even if you didn't know their official names.
Okay, first up, the big one, the blank slate, or tabula rasa. This is the idea that our minds start out with, well, nothing. No innate traits, no built-in structure. Everything we are, our personality, how smart we are, what we like, it's all just written on this slate by our culture and our experiences as we go through life.
All right, next on the list is the noble savage. This is the belief that deep down, in our natural state, humans are just good. We're born peaceful, we're selfless. It suggests that all the bad stuff, violence, greed, selfishness, that's not who we really are. It's just corruption that's been forced on us by civilization.
And rounding out this trio is the idea of the ghost in the machine. Now, this is the concept that your mind is totally separate from your physical brain. It's like an immaterial soul that's just driving the body. And this separation is super important because it's what allows for free will, a will that's completely free from the messy stuff of biology, genetics, or our evolutionary past.
So you take these three ideas together, the blank slate, the noble savage, and the ghost in the machine, and they've built this really powerful wall around the whole concept of human nature. But the central argument here is that this wall, it's starting to crumble under the weight of some pretty serious scientific discoveries. And the book points to 4 specific areas of science that are really challenging this blank slate idea. We're talking about the sciences of the mind, the brain, genes, and evolution.
So these new ideas are, as the book puts it, breaching the wall with a new understanding of human nature. So, what exactly is this new understanding? Well, the evidence coming out of these fields is painting a really different picture of who we are, maybe even a radical one.
Okay, let's start with brain science. There's some fascinating evidence of the brain having this built-in organization. Take phantom limbs, for instance. A lot of people who are born without a limb still feel it. Like they can feel it moving, itching, the whole thing. And what that suggests is that the brain doesn't just learn a map of the body through experience, it seems to come with a pre-wired body plan, a kind of neuromatrix.
Then you've got behavioral genetics. The book points to these incredible studies of identical twins who were separated at birth, raised in totally different homes, and the results are just wow. They often grow up to have these stunningly similar personalities, habits, even the same little quirks. It's pretty powerful evidence that our genes play a huge role in who we become.
And speaking of our built-in nature, evolutionary studies come along and throw a real wrench in the whole noble savage idea. I mean, when anthropologists look at the data, it turns out that far from being naturally peaceful, something like 90% of hunter-gatherer societies are known to engage in warfare. So it seems like conflict isn't some modern invention of civilization, it's a pretty consistent feature of human life.
I mean, take the Kung San people. For a long time, they were called the harmless people, kind of held up as the prime example of a peaceful, natural society. But when anthropologists studied them over a longer period, they found a different story. Their murder rate was actually higher than in many American inner cities at the time. The source uses examples just like this to argue that conflict and even violence aren't just byproducts of modern life. They're human universals.
Okay, so if all this scientific evidence is piling up, why is the idea of an innate human nature still so controversial? Why does it get such a fierce and, often emotional pushback?
Well, the argument in the book is that this resistance isn't just about the science. It's actually deeply moral and political. And it's all rooted in 4 really powerful fears about what acknowledging a human nature might mean for us and for our society.
So, fear number 1, inequality. The worry here is pretty straightforward. If we're not all born as identical blank slates, could that be used to justify discrimination? to justify oppression.
Fear number 2 is the fear of imperfectibility. This is the concern that if some of our less than noble motives, things like selfishness or violence, are innate, does that mean social reform is just a lost cause? Are we just stuck with who we are?
And that brings us to fear number 3, determinism. If our behavior is caused by our biology, by our genes, then what happens to free will? Does personal responsibility just go out the window?
And finally, the 4th fear, nihilism. If we are, at the end of the day, just biological machines, just products of evolution, does life have any higher meaning or purpose at all? So the book argues that these fears, they're understandable for sure, but it claims they're based on a bunch of confusions. And the central proposal to fix this is to create a new framework, one that very carefully pulls apart the scientific facts about human nature from our most important moral values.
So what does that really mean? The key idea is that our commitment to things like equality and peace shouldn't be built on a shaky foundation of scientific claims that could turn out to be wrong. Like, the principle of equal rights should be a moral stance we take, not some claim that we're all biologically identical.
And when you start thinking this way, it really shines a light on a fundamental split we see in politics. The book frames this not just as a fight over policies, but as a deep conflict between two totally different visions of what human nature is.
So this leads to these two competing political visions. On one side, you have the utopian vision. This one is rooted in the blank slate. It sees human nature as totally malleable, so social problems can be fixed. They can be engineered away. But then you have the tragic vision. This one sees human nature as having some inherent flaws and limitations. It says problems can't be solved, only managed with trade-offs. You can see how these two views would lead to completely different ideas about how to run a society.
And this is really the crucial point of the whole thing. Acknowledging that we have a human nature doesn't mean we're slaves to it. The book argues that by understanding our innate tendencies, our biases, our drives, our limits, it doesn't doom us. Actually, it gives us a much more realistic and effective toolkit. It lets us design better systems that work with our nature instead of fighting against it to actually make progress. So, all of this exploration leaves us with a really powerful final question. If a universal human nature really does exist, what does that actually mean for the future of human progress? The book's answer is that getting to know who we really are isn't a threat to our values at all. In fact, it might just be the only solid ground we have to build a better future on.